The sun rose over the horizon, casting a deep crimson glow across the city. Bill Gates stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his Seattle office, his face etched with concern. The latest climate reports lay open on his desk, their words stark and undeniable. Carbon levels in the atmosphere had reached an all-time high. The world was teetering on the edge of a catastrophic chain reaction. Bill set the report down, exhaling sharply. "We need to act, and we need to act now," he muttered. For decades, he had poured billions into technology-driven sustainability, nuclear fusion research, clean energy projects, carbon capture innovations. But as he stared at the data, an unsettling thought crept in. Was it enough? He grabbed his phone and called for an emergency meeting. Within an hour, his top advisors and scientists filled the boardroom. Bill took a deep breath and addressed them. "We need bold solutions," he said. His mind raced with possibilities. Geoengineering, atmospheric shields, massive solar energy expansion. The world needed a radical, large-scale intervention, and he was prepared to make it happen. He clenched his fists, looking out at the city skyline. The fate of the planet was, in many ways, in his hands. Meanwhile, in a small wooden cabin in California, Yvon Chouinard sipped his morning tea, staring at the forested hills surrounding his home. The air smelled different. The snow melt had come too early. The rivers were swelling faster than they should. Nature was whispering its warning. Yvon turned on the radio. The breaking news blared across the airwaves. Record-breaking heat waves, uncontrollable wildfires, rising sea levels. The anchor mentioned how billionaires like Bill Gates were preparing large-scale technological interventions. Yvon frowned. Hadn't technology and capitalism led humanity to this point? Now the same forces were offering a solution? He picked up his phone and called his network of environmental activists and scientists. "We don't need another technological fix," he said firmly. "We need to go back to the basics. Local conservation, community-driven sustainability. We need to heal the planet naturally." That day, he launched a worldwide grassroots movement. Patagonia diverted all its profits into reforestation projects, indigenous land preservation, and regenerative agriculture. His message was clear. People don't need billionaires saving them. They need to change how they live. The battle lines were drawn. Two visions for the future. Two men determined to save the world in completely different ways. While Yvon's movement spread across the world, Bill was moving at full speed. His team approved a series of high-tech solutions: floating solar farms, atmospheric shields, AI-driven energy grids. Bill wasn't waiting for the world to change its habits. He would force change. At the same time, Yvon's nature-first approach was gaining traction. Communities restored forests, reduced waste, and embraced simpler, sustainable lifestyles. Small actions with big impacts. News outlets were now reporting the clash of ideologies. Bill Gates' $50 billion climate plan. Technology will save us. Yvon Chouinard's rebellion. Nature has all the answers. The world was watching. Which path would win? A week later, world leaders, scientists, and activists gathered in New York for an emergency climate summit. Bill Gates stood before a massive screen displaying his solution: an atmospheric cooling system and a global clean energy acceleration plan. "If we don't act now," he said, "we will enter an era of irreversible destruction." The audience clapped. The world needed action. Then, Yvon stepped onto the stage. Unlike Bill's polished suit, he wore a simple Patagonia jacket, his stance calm but resolute. "We have lived out of balance with nature for too long," he said. "The solution isn't more manipulation, it's restoration. If we trust the earth, it will heal itself." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Bill clenched his jaw, taking the mic again. "Yvon," he said, "we don't have time to wait. We need massive, immediate action. Billions of lives depend on it. Yvon shook his head. Tampering with the atmosphere is playing with fire, Bill. What if it causes even bigger disasters? We should be reducing emissions, rewilding lands, letting the planet reset. Silence. Two visions. Two leaders. And no clear answer. Days after the summit, disasters escalated. A massive ice shelf collapsed in Antarctica, sending tsunamis across coastal cities. Wildfires engulfed parts of Australia and California. Millions of people displaced as floods wiped out entire regions. The world was running out of time. Bill's team rushed to deploy the first phase of his plan. A small-scale atmospheric cooling test successfully lowered temperatures in one region. But at the same time, unpredictable weather patterns formed elsewhere. Was technology fixing the planet or destabilizing it further? Meanwhile, Yvon's reforestation efforts saved villages from landslides. Regenerative farming prevented food shortages. But was it happening fast enough? The world held its breath. Would it be technology or nature that saved humanity? Bill's global intervention was hours away from being launched. Protests erupted worldwide. Millions of people demanded that nature be allowed to heal on its own. For the first time, Bill hesitated. Then he saw Yvon outside his headquarters, surrounded by thousands of activists. Their eyes weren't just filled with anger, they held hope. "Let him in," Bill ordered. Minutes later, Yvon stepped into the control room. "Bill, you can't do this," Yvon said, voice shaking. "People are ready to change. Let's work together instead." Bill studied him for a long moment. Then he asked, "What do you suggest?" A pause. Yvon smiled. "Technology alone won't save us, but combined with nature, it just might." Bill exhaled, and for the first time in years, he changed course. Bill and Yvon announced their partnership. Instead of a global atmospheric intervention, they launched a hybrid approach. Massive solar and wind farms powered a transition away from fossil fuels. Forest restoration programs worked alongside AI-driven conservation projects. Local communities were given access to funding for self-sustaining agriculture. The media exploded. For the first time, technology and nature were working together. And it was working. A year later, in the Amazon rainforest, Bill Gates and Yvon Chouinard planted a tree together. Surrounded by environmentalists, scientists, and volunteers, they watched as communities thrived under their combined efforts. Bill smirked. "You were right, Yvon. Nature and technology can work together." Yvon grinned. "Took you long enough." The two men shook hands, looking at the horizon where a new future was unfolding. Now the question remains, if these two men could change their approach, can the rest of the world?